Okay, good evening and welcome to the Torah studies this week, Parshas Toldos. And the topic we're discussing tonight is a very important one. This holy land is your land. Talking about the land of Israel, of course. And we need to understand why is it our land. But first I want to ask a question. When did the land of Israel become the holy land? Of course, when you ask anyone, if you're going to the Holy Land, he will tell you what is the Holy Land, the land of Israel. But when did it become the Holy Land? So in today's class, we want to go to the core, the real answer, the real reason. What is behind the claim that the Jewish people have to the land of Israel? We know in today's age, as we see what's happening around in the world, anti-Semitism, and when people, you speak to the youth, even among the Jewish people, the Jewish youth, if you don't give them the right answer of why does the land of Israel belong to the Jewish people? What is our claim to the land? So you need to give them the tools. You need to give them the right answer. I'm sure you heard what happened a few years ago with the White House reporter, Helen Thomas. There was a Jewish reporter, what's his name? David Nesanoff, I think his name is. And he asked her a question, what she thinks about Israel. I want to share this with you. 1 second. Just a minute. Let me try it again. Yeah, there you go. No, just a second. I'll try it one more time with the sound this time.
For 50 years, covered 10 presidencies, sat in the front row at presidential news briefings, known as the Dean of the White House Press Corps.
Any comments on Israel? We're asking everybody today. Any comments
Tell them
on
to
Israel?
get the hell out of Palestine.
Ooh. Any better comments?
Remember, these people are occupied, and it's their land, not German, it's not Poland.
So where should they go? What should they do?
They go home.
Where's the home?
Poland.
So the Jews,
Germany.
You think Jews go back to Poland and Germany?
And America and everywhere else.
So this White House reporter was fired after this event. It took this really went viral, as you remember. And later on, David Nesanoff became very popular. He went to give lectures all over the world. At the end of the class, we'll play a little clip of the message that he gave after this, what happened. And here's the question: what do we tell our children? How do we present when we're talking this? The question when we are asked, what is our claim to the land of Israel? And we can say that, generally speaking, there are basic three claims, three answers that is given when people ask, what is our claim to Israel? So, number one, people say that Israel accepted the partition plan approved by the United Nations, leading to the State of Israel's birth in 1948. We all know the story. That it was the Balfour Declaration, what was 1927, I believe. I may be wrong. But the declaration that the land should be given to the Israels, and then the United Nations accepted the partition, the agreement of partition, that there should be the Arabs and the Jews should divide the land of Israel, what's it called, Palestine, between the Jews and the Arabs. The Jews accepted, and the Arabs, they did not accept. They rejected it, and the war broke out. That's one claim that people say that's why the land of Israel belongs to us. There is another claim that they say that the Jewish people need to be protected, and only as a sovereign people with our own country are we capable of defending ourselves. Especially this came out especially after the Holocaust, when we saw what happened with the Holocaust, that the Jews needed the land, they needed a place to protect themselves. And then there is a third answer that people give, that we have historical rights to the land. And Israel has been the homeland of the Jewish people for more than 3,000 years. And although people came and went, and the different government changed, but Jews always were there. Throughout the years, always there was a Jewish presence in this land. And it is true, of course. But in order to really strengthen the claims, we need to understand that there is also counter-arguments to these claims. And each of these three claims, there's counter-arguments. When you say that it was the partition, the United Nations decided that the Jews should have this land, so people argue that this itself was an immoral colonial activity. If people were there, who gives the right to the United Nations to make such a decision? And when people say that in order to be that the Jews need to be protected, fine, the Jews need to be protected, but who says that Israel should be the land to be protected in? As a matter of fact, if you remember, in the history, there was the beginners of the Zionist movement, they had a thought to have a land in Uganda, somewhere in Africa. So what gives you the right to come to the land of Israel and create over there a place for protect yourself? Not only that, but some would claim that in the contrary, that the Jews are concentrated in one place, that's even a greater danger for the Jewish people. If people remember, those people who remember 1967 war, when there was the Jews, so the Jews were literally in danger of annihilation. When all Jews concentrated, you had the Arab countries surrounding them. That was a real danger. So that too is not a very strong claim. And even the third argument that we have historic There is historically we always were there. It's our land. But this, people change, people come, people go. So who gives us the right to take it away? Especially if we know that the land of Israel originally was by the Canaanites. So anyway, all of these arguments, they may work for some people, may not work for others. So we need to dig a little deeper to get what is the real argument? What is our real connection to the land of Israel? So we'll start with in this week's Torah portion. In this week's Torah portion, we have the story of Yitzchak. We're talking about the life of Yitzchak. And at one point, there was a hunger in the land of Israel where Yitzchak was. Our father Isaac, the second of the three forefathers. And at that point, when there was a hunger in the land, Yitzchak decided to go down to Egypt. Why to Egypt? That's exactly what his father did, his father Abraham. And that's exactly what his son did, Yaakov after him. When there was a hunger, they went down to Egypt. Over there was food. So let's see what the Torah says. Hashem said to Yitzchak, do not go down to Egypt. It says, and God appeared to him, to Isaac, and said, do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land that I will tell you. Sojourn in the land that I will, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. For to you and to your seed I will give all these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Avraham, your father. And as we said before, why did Yitzchak want to go down to Egypt? Isaac had in mind to go down to Egypt as his father had gone down in the days of the famine. But God said to him, do not go down to Egypt. You are a perfect burnt offering, and being outside of the Holy Land is not fitting to you. It doesn't say outside of the Holy Land, as we'll soon see. It says, Ein chutza la'aretz, outside of the land. Outside of the land is not befitting to you. So the land that belongs to the Jewish people, that God gave to Avraham, it was way before even the Jewish people ever went down. We know God gave it to Avraham, as we see in the next text. This is by the Beris Bein HaBesarim, by the covenant that Hashem made with Avraham. That says, and God, on that day, God formed a covenant with Avraham, saying, to your seed I have given this land, from the river of Egypt until the great river, the Euphrates River. You know where the Euphrates River is? Don't tell the Jordanian, the Syrian, the Iraqis, because that's how far, really, the land of Israel goes. But that's going to be, of course, after Mashiach comes, we'll have the rest of the land. But this is what the land that Hashem gave to Avraham. And if you look carefully, it says, I gave to you. I have given. It didn't say, I will give to you. And indeed, the Medrash says, God's spoken words is considered like deed. As the verse states, to your seed, I have given this land. It doesn't state, I will give this land, but I have given this land. So basically, that is the ultimate answer if you want to tell when you talk to your child, which is so important. To talk to the Jewish youth, that's the most important. To convince the enemies, it's not so easy. To convince some Gentiles, perhaps. But the most important is to convince yourself. Now, we should get educated about this and to talk to the youth, to talk to our children, to understand why is this land our land? What is our claim? That's not the United Nations Declaration. It is our claim because this is the land that God gave to Avraham. He gave it to him, and he gave it to him for eternal gift for all of the children of the which called Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. And the fact that this land became the land of Israel even before the Jewish people went in there has also halachic ramifications. If you know the story with the daughters of Tzlafchad, the story in the Torah is when the Jewish people came closer to the land of Israel after 40 years in the desert, there was the daughters of Tzlafchad ben Chefer who passed away in the desert. He did not have any sons. And as in the Torah, the way that the land was divided, it was divided to the sons. And the girls who married the boys, they went together with the husbands. So he didn't have any sons, and the daughters came to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, and said, why should we lose out the land of our father? He passed away, he didn't have any sons, give it to us. As we see inside. Vatikravna bnei Tzlafchad ben Chefer, the daughters of Tzlafchad, the son of Chefer, the son of Gilad, the son of Machir, the son of Menashe, of the families of Menashe, son of Yosef, they came forward, and his daughters' name were Machla, Noya, Chagla, Milka, and Tirza. And they said to Moshe Rabbeinu, why should our father's name be eliminated from his family because he had no son? Give us a portion along with our father's brothers. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? The Torah says, so Moses brought their case before God. So the question is, Moses gave their case before God. And God says, yes, give it to them. The question is, why didn't Moses know this thing? Moses knew the Torah. God gave him the Torah. And yet this thing, he didn't know for some reason. And the answer is, Moses didn't know because Moses knew that Hashem promised the land to Avraham. And he knows the laws that when a father inherits a land and he has no sons to inherit, it goes to the daughters. But in this case, this was before they even conquered the land. So that's why the question that Moses had was, what is the status of this land that their father didn't inherit yet? And that's how Moses brought this in front of God. And the answer that God says, yes, give it to them. What does that mean? What Hashem is saying is that when I gave it to Avraham, I gave it already, even though they didn't really conquer it, but it's already theirs. And because it's already theirs, they have a right in their father's inheritance, even though they didn't actually went in there and conquer it yet. Okay? So that is the answer. God gave the land to Avraham to pass on to his children. The land already belonged to Tzlafchad. That's why the 5 daughters received their land from Moshe Rabbeinu. But we have a problem over here. This is nice words. Yes, the land was theirs. The land belonged to Tzlafchad. But really, does it really belong to them? Is it really considered the land of Israel? Is it really considered already the Holy Land? We can argue that it is not considered at that point, it still was not considered the Holy Land. How do we know that? Because we know the Holy Land has specific laws. In the Holy Land, there is what's called the mitzvot atluyot ba'aretz, the mitzvahs that are dependent on the land, like mitzvahs of giving tithing the food, the food that grows, or like the mitzvah of Shemitah and other things. What part of the land is considered the land of Israel that is obligated to all of the mitzvahs, the holy mitzvahs that are connected with the land? The land that they actually conquered, not the land that was promised to Avraham. Those are in the words of the Rambam. The Maimonides explains it explicitly, very clearly, that this is the land that is only the land that was conquered by the Jews. That is the land that became a holy land and is obligated in the mitzvahs. Here's a quote from the Rambam, the Maimonides. It says, whenever Eretz Israel is mentioned, the intent is the land conquered by the kings of Israel or a prophet with the consent of the entire Jewish people. This is called a conquest of the community. If, however, an individual Jew, a family or a tribe, goes and conquers a place for themselves, even in the land given to Avraham, it is not considered as Eretz Israel in the sense that one is obligated to observe all the mitzvahs there. All the lands that the Jews who ascended from Egypt took possession of were sanctified in the first consecration of the land. When by contrast the descendant of the exiles ascended from Babylon and took possession of a portion of the land, they consecrated it a second time. Now this consecration is perpetuated forever, for that time and for all times. Okay? So the mitzvah of Israel only took place after it was conquered, which is when the Jews assumed legal control over the land. So here's the question. Did Israel only become ours when we conquered it? So what was accomplished with the gift to Avraham? That's a very strong question. We just said that when Hashem gave to Avraham, it was already considered the land, your land, I already gave it to you. And yet we say, no, it is not considered the land, the holy land, until you conquer it. So what's going on over here? And the answer to this question is that there are really two elements of Eretz Israel. There are two elements for the land of Israel. There is the ownership of the land, and there is the sanctity of the land. Those are two separate elements. The ownership was established when Hashem gave it to Avraham. When Hashem gave it to Avraham, it became his land and his children's land forever. But the sanctity to become holy, a holy land, that took place much later. Let's see it inside the way the Rebbe explains. Says the Rebbe, two things occurred when the land was given to the Jewish people. A, the monetary element, meaning the Jewish ownership of the land of Israel, and B, the sanctity of the land. The first element, Jewish ownership of the land, was achieved by God giving the land of Israel to Avraham Avinu, our patriarch Abraham. But the second element, the land of Israel's sanctity, especially the special mitzvahs that apply there, first occurred when the Jewish people entered the land. This is what we see. So gifting the land to Avraham is the ownership of the land. Conquering the land is the sanctity of the land. Once we conquered the land, that is when the sanctity became the holy land. This is what we see also by Avraham. It says, and I will give you and your seeds after you the land of your sojourns, the entire land of the Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be to them for a God. This is what we see. Hashem says to Avraham after he already told him, I gave you the land. He still says, I will give you and your seed after you. Why is he saying it again? And here the Maharal comes and explains. Rabbi Yudalov, he says, it is true that the verse states, and I will give you and your seed after you, meaning in the future. But that refers to the actual giving, which hadn't yet taken place and would only occur in the future. That's the way the words the Maharal says. But the way the Rebbe explains it is that what happens later is the holiness of the land takes place after the Jews, when the Jews actually conquer it, or a little before, as we'll soon see. What does that mean? So the question is, why does it have to be in two stages? Why did God have to give Avram first the land, the ownership of the land, and the sanctity of the land only came many years later? Why couldn't God give right away Avraham and make it right away a holy land? And that is the question the Rebbe is asking. Let's see it inside. Darf man verstehen, says the Rebbe, the question arises, considering the view in the Medrash and Halacha that God's words conferred ownership of the land to Avraham and to his descendants after him, why can't we say that they conferred sanctity as well? In which case the laws pertaining to the land would have gone into effect. Okay? And that's the question. Why can the two elements take effect together? Why did there have to be a delay? So here's the thing. You see, 440 years took place since the day that Yitzchak was born until the Jews entered the land of Israel. It was 440 years. And in this period, so many events took place. Events like Avram's tests, the binding of Yitzchak, the birth of the 12 tribes, the Jews going down to Egypt, being enslaved in Egypt, ultimately God sending Moshe Rabbeinu, God getting Moshe Rabbeinu, taking the Jews out of Egypt, receiving the Torah and entering the 40 years in the desert and finally entering the desert. There was one thing in these 440 years that changed everything. What was the one thing that changed everything? It was the actual giving of the Torah. The actual giving of the Torah, that God gave the Torah to the Jewish people on the Mount Sinai, that changed everything. Because we know, we spoke many times before, that our patriarchs, our ancestors before the giving of the Torah, they also fulfilled. They knew about the mitzvahs, they knew about the commandments, and they fulfilled the commandments. But there was a major difference between the mitzvahs, the commandments that our patriarchs did before the giving of the Torah, and the way we do the mitzvahs after the giving of the Torah. Before the giving of the Torah, whatever they did, they could not change anything and make it holy. When Hashem gave us the Torah, and He told us to put on tefillin, for example, what do we take? How do we make tefillin? We take skin of a cow and shape it into a tefillin. We write the scrolls and we put it on the arm. We make the bracha, and this piece of parchment, of skin of a cow, becomes holy. Why should a cow become holy? Just because someone shaped it into tefillin. And of course the answer is because God said so. Once we have the commandment of God, He enabled to sanctify something which is material. He basically connected between the two worlds, the spiritual world and the physical world. Before the giving of the Torah, our patriarchs, when they performed the mitzvahs, they became spiritual, but they could not bring down the spirituality into the physical elements of this world. But after God gave us the Torah and He commanded us, it says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, God came down on the Mount Sinai. And when He instructed us to do things with material objects and to do mitzvahs with them, those objects became holy. So what fundamental change did the Jewish people undergo between the times of the forefathers and the conquering of the land in the time of Yehoshua? That what took place is the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. As the Rabbi says, the difference between the mitzvahs performed by the forefathers before the Torah was given and the mitzvahs performed by the Jewish people after the Torah was given has been discussed many times, says the Rebbe. Indeed, we discussed it as well. Inasmuch as the mitzvahs before the Torah was given weren't obligatory, they weren't mandated by God, they were unable to transform. They couldn't transform the physical world. The physical material of an object used for a mitzvah to confer upon it the holy status of a mitzvah object, the effect of the mitzvah was only on the person performing it. So the people were changed, but the object, the physical object, could not be changed. In other words, the formal command, when the Torah was given, created the notion of a holy object existing in the world. A holy object to exist in the world was only created after the giving of the Torah. Something can become a channel for a mitzvah to be performed with and through it. When a person performs the mitzvah, holiness is stamped into a physical object, rendering it a holy object. And the same thing says the Rebbe. The same thing says the Rebbe is true when we're talking about the land of Israel. You see, calling the land of Israel, calling it a holy land, is an oxymoron. How could a land be holy? Holiness is spiritual. Land, we're talking about a physical land. How could a land be holy? So therefore, when God gave to Abraham the land, it wasn't the Holy Land. He gave him the land as a gift, as a piece of real estate given to Avraham. Of course, it was a special land that God, but in God's eyes, it was special. But in the physical world, this land did not receive its holiness. When did it receive its holiness? Only when God gave the Torah. When God gave the Torah to the Jewish people and he instructed them to go into the land and to conquer the land and to take root in the land and to perform the mitzvahs, the commandments of the land, that made it a holy land. And that is the difference. As the Rebbe says, Al derze, the same applies to the land of Israel. Though the Jewish people already owned the land of Israel before the Torah was given, because God has spoken to that effect, he said it to Avraham, the sanctity could not yet be stamped into the physical land. However, after the Torah was given, even before the people conquered it, it became possible for the land to become holy as a result of God's command to conquer it. So the possibility to become holy took place by the time when God gave the Torah. When did it actually become holy? When they actually conquered it. When the Jewish people took over the land, by conquering it, the holiness of the land was established. And there's the answer. Before the giving of the Torah, land didn't become holy. After the children of Israel received the Torah, holiness could transfer to the land. Now this holiness, this sanctity of the land is something that doesn't change. This is something that lasts forever. You see, there is the very first verse in the Torah. There's a famous commentator, the Rashi. He comments on the very first pasuk, the very first verse in the Torah, Bereishis bara Elokim, in the beginning God created the heaven and earth. So Rashi says, Rabbi Yitzchak said, shouldn't the Torah have started with the verse, this month is to you, which is the first commandment that the Israelites were commanded. Torah, after all, is a book of laws, guiding us what to do, when to do, how to do. So why does the Torah begin with the whole history, how the world was created? Why is this part of the Torah? That's what Rashi says. Why then does it begin with in the beginning, meaning with the history of the creation? And Rashi answers, the reason is reflected in the verse, the strength of his works he related to his people to give them the inheritance of the nations. If the nations of the world should say to Israel, you are robbers, for you conquered by force the land of the 7 nations of Canaan, we will reply, the entire earth belongs to the Holy One. Blessed be He. He created it and gave it to whomever He deemed proper. When He wished, He gave it to the Canaanites, and when He wished, He took it away from them and gave it to us. The question, however, is, if you think about it, throughout history, land is taken from country to country. There was always wars. People always took land and shifted ownership throughout history. No one ever came up with a claim that you're thieves, you took my land. There was wars. People fought wars. Some wars were for good reasons, some were for not good reasons. But they took the land. And when you took the land, you took it because this is now becomes yours. And yet, why over here? What exactly is Rashi saying? They complain, they have a complaint. The nations of the world will complain that we are robbers, we took away the land from Canaanites. Isn't that the normal way of things, where you fight wars and you win and you take over things? Countries change hands since time immemorial. So the Rebbe gives a very, very interesting answer. In 1965, the Rebbe brought up this question. And the Rebbe said, you know what the claim is? It's not that we took the land, because this happens throughout history. The claim is that we took away the land in a way that it became a holy land. It became the land of Israel. It became an eternal conquest. That it belongs from then, it belongs to the Jewish people. It became the land of Israel, no matter how many years we are away from it. It still belongs to us. We conquered it in a way not like any other country conquers another country. We took it from them, and they know that it became the land of Israel. A Jew who never visited Israel is part of Bnei Israel, and the land belongs to him because he is part of this nation. This is what bothered them, and this is what Rashi comes to teach us. That the Torah tells us, Bereshis bara Elokim, in beginning God created the world. He created the world and he gave it to whomever he wished. He gave it to the Canaanites, it was part of the regular part of the world. And then he took it away from them and gave it to us. He gave it to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people made it a holy land. And that became something that forever, because this is the wish of God, the will of God. Let's see how the Rebbe says this inside. Yeah. So although painful, conquest of land is common. Did anybody ever consider this theft? Says the Rebbe, the conquest of the land of Israel is different. For when the Jewish people took the land of the seven nations, the land itself changed. Before it had been a land like all other lands, which could belong to any nation. But from the moment it was conquered by the Jewish people, it was transformed into the land of Israel. A Jewish land through and through. And for all times, to the extent that it can no longer belong to any other nation. The Gentiles also know that once the Jewish people took the land of the seven nations, it became Eretz Israel forever. And this is precisely why they claim, you are robbers. Inasmuch as before the Jewish people conquered it, it was a land like all others that could belong to any nation. The Jewish people don't have the right to take the land of Israel in such a way that it will be taken from them forever. This, they claim, is robbery. And what is the answer? This is the answer that Rashi brings. The answer to that claim is that the entire earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be He. He created it. He has the right to transform the land's quality from one that can be called the land of the nations to one that is exclusively the land of Israel. That is the core. That is the core answer. Now, to go teach this, to tell it to the enemies of us, of the Jewish people, will they accept it? Probably not. This is, however, this is what needs to be in the core of, first of all, our own education. To teach ourselves that we have the understanding of what is the land of Israel. The Gentiles also, those who believe in the Bible, when you go this with this conviction, they will accept it, they will understand this. But the most important thing, as the Rebbe says in a fascinating letter, the Rebbe wrote a letter to Shazar, to the president of Israel, Zalman Shazar, saying to them, what is important is that the youth, our children should know that. The morale of our soldiers, that they should, when they will know that this is our land, this is the land, the holy land that God gave to Am Israel to become a holy land forever. That will change everything. That's it inside. So anyone can respect our position as a deeply held conviction. We're not talking about politics. We're not talking about the United Nations. We're talking about our real deep conviction that this is something that God gave to us in order to transform a land, to make it a holy land forever. Says the Rabbi here in the letter, I have received complaints. Why do I invoke the biblical land of Israel, the Holy Land, and the covenant with Abraham with connection with the modern Israel? Why do I mix God into the picture? After all, they say, those who fought for the creation of the state, those who led it, those who currently direct it, and its authorized representatives, they all proclaim and take pains to emphasize that Israel is a state founded in 1948. Says the Rebbe, my answer, put frankly, is that their narrative is false. No new entity was created in 1948. Rather, that was the year in which a large part of the land of Israel was liberated. An entity established in 1948 based on the agreement or authorization of the nations of the world has no strength or justification in terms of authentic response to the claim, you are thieves for having conquered lands belonging to others, etc. A claim raised by the Arabs, the Vatican, the United Nations, and some Jews as well. This is why it is so crucial to underscore that it is our God-given homeland. Now, I do not delude myself into imagining that these just and honest arguments will prevail in the United Nations, the Vatican, etc. Nevertheless, transmitting this truth is critical for the morale of the Jewish youth living in the Holy Land, including those serving in the IDF, for Jewish American students, and for the Jewish youth of other countries as well. Israel is not only the land with promise, but also a promised land. So, again, will we convince the enemies? Probably not. But this is something that really needs to be, we need to teach ourselves, to teach our children, and to tell them the truth. This is the Holy Land. And what makes it holy? That God made it holy, commanded us to enter the land of Israel and to perform the mitzvahs, the commandments, the godly commandments in the land, as this year itself is a year of Shemitah, the sabbatical year. So many laws that applies to the Holy Land. So this, in the beginning of the class, we mentioned about this reporter, Ellen Thomas, that showed her true colors, how anti-Semitic she is. And so this, the reporter, David Nesenov, he spoke many times, and I have a recording here I wanted to share about. He mentioned that he received so many phone calls. One of the phone calls he received from Ari Fleischer, and he told him, you have to have a message. You're going to be getting phone calls from all over from the press, from the media. Everybody was after him. You're going to need to have a message. And so he figured, who should he call to ask for a message? So he called Elie Wiesel. And Professor Elie Wiesel told him, if you want a message, find out what the Lubavitcher Rebbe's message about this is. So let me share this short video. Just a second. Yeah.
The whole world's gone crazy. I said, yeah, I'm a Chabad. And Elie Wiesel says to me, why don't you find out what the Lubavitcher Rebbe would have wanted you to say? Oh, okay. Thank you very much, Professor. I've spoken to him since then. Next morning, I go to shul. My Chabad shul on Long Island, Stony Brook, Long Island. Chaim Grossbaum is the rabbi. I walk, of course, now I have an entourage. I'm walking in. There's a guy carrying my talis and my tefillin bag, and I'm walking, I mean, I have no time for anything. I'm on the phone. I'm like, strap me up, I'll say amen. Amen. So, after the minyan's over, I go up to Chaim Grossbaum, and I say to him, Ari Fleischer told me to get a message, and Elie Wiesel said I should find out what the Lubavitcher Rebbe would want me to say on television. Now, this is one of the reasons. I love Chabad for a lot of reasons. This is one of the reasons I love Chabad. Anybody else you say that sentence to will look at you like, what? Chabad rabbi? He looks at you and says, okay, let's find out. Right, we got to save the world. Let's go to it. Come on, he gets it. Chabad's here to do it. We got to take care of things. He said, I can't give you the message, the rabbi said. He said, but I have to find the right person, somebody who knows, what the Rebbe thinks and how he thought and all his writings about everything, and also somebody who knows Washington and somebody who understands politics and the press. He came up with one name, Rabbi Avraham Shem Tov, who happens to be the father of the mashgiach at the White House, by the way, just as if you're keeping track of Chabad rabbis in my story. So, Avraham Shem Tov, he gets him on the phone. And of course, he knew the whole story. He knows everything about it. He's also a big, great rabbi. He puts it on speakerphone, and he talks. Now, even though I'm a good talker, I listened very carefully. And I listened to him. And he spoke. And he gave me a message from the Rebbe. And since then, we've learned more about the Rebbe, and it is indeed a message from the Rebbe. What was the message? Well, because you folks somehow are here tonight, for whatever your schedules and this and how you came to meet Chabad and all you do, each of you has a story. For some reason, you're sitting here tonight. And because I spent 3 days on an airplane, okay, I'm here tonight. And we're having a little hashgacha pratis, a little divine providence that all of us are meeting at this time in our life at this moment. Baruch Hashem, thank God I'm going to get to give you this message. He said like this. If you have a friend and your friend goes away for a year, is it still your friend? Sure, it's still my friend. If your friend goes away for 4 years, is it still your friend? Sure, still my friend. If your friend, as we get older, goes away for 50 years, you don't see your friend in 50 years, is it still your friend? Nah, not really. It's someone I used to know. It's not my friend. But if you have a child, and your child goes away for a year to college or someplace, is it still your child? Of course it is. If your child goes for 4 years, is it still your child? Of course it is. If chas v'sholem chalil v'chas, God forbid, I don't want to think of the circumstances of what it is, but let's just say, for example, your child you don't see for 50 years, is it still your child? Of course it is. He said, we are not the friends of Israel. We are B'nai Yisrael. We are the children of Israel. Sometimes we're away for 50 years in North America or Australia or Europe, and sometimes we're away for 2,000 years in Golos and diaspora, and sometimes we're away for 4 years in Auschwitz. But we are always the children of Israel. Doesn't matter where we come from, what accent, what language, doesn't matter what era we're born in, doesn't matter if we ever step foot in Israel. We are the children of Israel. And the children of Israel and the land of Israel are one. According to the Torah, according to God, it's God-given. And you can't separate them, and they exist because of each other. The Jew walking in the street in New York doesn't even know he's Jewish and doesn't care. He's Jewish and exists because of Israel, and Israel exists because of him.
Yeah, so this is the message. This is the message. We are one. Am Israel. There is one Jewish nation. There is one Eretz Israel, and there is one Torah Israel, and one God. We're all united. All is one. That's the message that we have to take, and that's the message we have to go with, and the message we should not be afraid to share. Number one, with ourselves, with our children, and with the rest of the world. So, thank you all for joining.
Rabbi, first of all, thank you very much for